It is 5:32 on Monday, November 25th. This is the Business Retention Subcommittee meeting of the Economic Development Commission. So, Cliff, how are you? Sherry, Dale?
Hello.
So we wanted to cover tonight, a few meetings back, we had talked about organizing, creating a more formal business retention process and, forming a subcommittee in order to lead that effort. And we've enlisted Dale to help guide us through that process, a little bit, on what the specific steps would look like, but then kind of getting into formalizing things a little bit more and how we move forward. So, Dale, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Sherry. I don't know have we ever met? I know I've met Cliff at the meetings.
Oh, we've never met. I'm new to the EDC.
Okay, I'll do a quick introduction, but one thing I just want to know from the host, are the settings such that I can share the screen? All right, thank you. That's all I want to know. So Sherry, I'm a resource to the commission. I work for Rex Development, which is the Regional Economic Development Organization for New Haven region. And I'm hired under a grant at no service, at no cost, I should say, to the town. So it's a free service. Okay. And I'm on call for whatever the chief elected officials and EDCs need in the area of economic development. I've been in the field for like 40 years. So
God bless you.
go to LinkedIn. I won't give you my infomercial here, but go to LinkedIn.
Okay, got it.
Good. So I've been active as a staff member, and I've been with the EDC for, I'd say, about a year altogether. It's not quite a year, but 9-10 months, something like that, since Mika came into office. And my job is really whatever the locality wants. And in many cases in the region, it's been assisting local EDCs in capacity building, long-range planning, strategic planning, work planning. They're all a little bit different. And as I was trying to tell Scott today, your EDC is you've moved up a couple levels from where other EDCs are, where you have a very good, well-functioning EDC, and you've identified an area. And I've done a presentation. I'll get your email from Scott,
yes,
from the town, and I'll forward you the presentation I did on overall economic development issues. So you can just check that out. So tonight's topic is business retention. We talked at length about what the priorities were, because you can't do everything at one time. Mm-hmm. And I've always made a big pitch for business retention being the most important thing you can do. If you can't retain the businesses you have, you can't grow your economy. And the grand list in Woodbridge has been stagnant for 10 years. I think it even went down a little bit. And usually that's a sign of not having a business retention plan. But people retire. COVID certainly impacted things. And so there's business retention, there's an expansion of current businesses, there's business attraction, which many municipalities are interested in, the grand list growth. And there's business creation. That's for young entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, and that's a growing marketplace. But tonight we're going to focus on retention, since that's what the commission wanted to do. And in many cases, the retention versus attraction thing have different characteristics, different things to focus on. So I'm going to share my screen. So get right to it. If I can find it, there we are. Where are we? I'm hoping. Oops, wrong one. Nope, I got the wrong one there. Sorry, I apologize. Stop. All right, I'm gonna try it again.
Okay.
I'm trying to, this is what I was a little worried about. It says Microsoft Word 3 files. No, it's only going to one file. Let's see. Oh, I see. My bad. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm not used to WebEx. I'm used to Teams or Zoom. Okay, so it says business retention expansion strategies, creating value. That's what you're looking at, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, as I've talked to the commission about before, and I presented this in a quick format, tonight I'm going to get into a little bit more details. I wanted to take about 15, 20 minutes to go through this and then talk about next steps. Business retention is a kind of a building blocks process. Some people see business retention, and please feel free to interrupt me or ask questions, or I don't know where the chat box is, but I'm sure I could find it. It's really a way of structured way of dealing with businesses that are already here. And most of the time, people think of business retention as just doing business visitation, which is certainly an important thing. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a little while. But you can't really get there until you take some early steps. And these are things that will turn into tasks for the EDC. You really need to know first of who you have before you start developing a business visitation, because really business visitation, business retention is probably the most time-consuming aspect of economic development. If it's business attraction, you're sort of a creature of what the commercial brokers are doing, but you really need to know your town better. I find that most EDCs, most town residents don't know everything about their town in terms of who the major employers are and sort of the sub-level employers. You kind of know the big ones, your big healthcare facilities. Maybe a large, like a scientific or like a bioscience type of. You've got a couple of them in Woodbridge, and you kind of know your retail. You have a shopping center, some auto places, but you do have a lot of healthcare or senior care related businesses in town. But when you start to really look at who the taxpayers are, you're going to find you have a lot of small manufacturers. Over by where the big residential project going on, there's a couple side streets over there that you find some manufacturers you barely knew about, some of which I know you all know Jamie Scott, who's got the HVAC manufacturing business. But there are other ones, and construction companies, and the list goes on and on. So one of the primary things I start off with is trying to identify by sector, construction, manufacturing, healthcare, who the major employers and taxpayers are as a baseline to go and do some visits and to find out. There's other ways to cross-check the information through your assessor, the declarations, for example, of your manufacturers, all the equipment and trucks and things that they have. There's the Department of Labor, which designated what are called NAICS codes. The acronym is National Association of something, something, something. I forgot what it stands for, but anybody who has.
It's industrial classification.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody who pays payroll taxes gets assigned a NAICS code, and it's a national code. It's not the state of Connecticut or local code. And then once you identify who you have, now you can kind of figure out how to use your time well, because you can chase shiny objects and sometimes you have to, because if you hear of a business, for example, that's in trouble or thinking of leaving, I know all this gets into some of the tasks you'll be doing along the way. You want to get out there and talk to them. So once you identify who you have, now you can kind of develop a way to get out there and find out what they want, especially if you're trying to do some long range planning, because you're all volunteers. You're not paid people. There are some paid people that are hired as consultants that work for the town, but for everybody to do a good job, including Mika, that you need to understand who your customers are. So you can find out any number of ways. You can do surveys. I don't rely on surveys that much. I think they're not scientific. I do think once you identify a group, you could start doing some informal surveys that might be helpful. And then really the best way to find out is through different business visitation process. And when I say with a purpose, there's a reason why I'm saying that. I'm going to come back to that. This is like the 40,000 feet overview. But there are a couple ways to do business visitations. It's not like, hey, how are you? What do you do here? That's kind of patronizing and insulting to many businesses because they're busy. You really want to learn about what the economy is like and learn as much as you can before you even go walk in the door. You know how many people go, what time of day you go. We'll get into that in a couple minutes. And there's a difference between bigger employers and small retail, different kinds of information you're going to find out. Once you get them identified and you get some lay of the land on what's going on with them, you create a collaboration between them by having, let's say, all the healthcare people, meet once every quarter to talk about common issues. In many industries, you'll learn very quickly that what they are. They're always workforce is like the most common thing you're going to hear as an issue. And the other things might be, regulations, legislation. In healthcare, legislation is a big thing. And so these are the things you're going to find out, and then you'll start to try to deliver on what they need. If you do working with small businesses like retail or service providers or in shopping centers or in their own buildings, you're going to have different information that you're going to try and find out. Well, you get them to collaborate, you start to save time, because again, you're all volunteers. The big thing to note about these visits it's kind of when it's convenient for them. If it's retail, you don't want to get them when their store opens or at the very end of the day or lunchtime. You have to pick a time that's good for them. If it's manufacturing, you have to go really, really early in the morning, because that's, they got a shop to run and they don't really have time for a lot of fanfare, but it's important to talk to them.
Hey, Dale. So I know early on, right, we assembled this. I believe that there's a list with classifications for the businesses in Woodbridge. I remember,
Yep.
Again, going back to March, we were working on that. But the classifications, do you recall, did we ever hammer that out so we could kind of look at the sectors?
I think there's some information. I think we need to revisit it as a committee. I think there was some information. You might need an intern or something like that to really, round it out, because you want to know how many employees they have, who the real contact person is. So you might have some information, but I find that people always need more. So yes, whatever you have, we'll build on that. But somebody has to do this. Now, in your case, in Woodbridge's case, you have, and I don't know if everybody's familiar, Cliff or Sherry, that you have Goldman in York, who was hired as a consultant, sort of like the land use development consultant for the town, and they're going to have some of that information. They'll probably have the big taxpayers, but they're not going to have all the little guys behind the, buildings behind buildings kind of thing. And you're not going to have like hundreds of them, because your commercial area is not that big. So anyway, whatever you have, we'll build on. And then, I probably want to get to know some of the EDC members to see what their own backgrounds are a little bit more, so maybe they can offer some insights to some of these industries. Once you go to visit them, they're going to tell you what's on their mind. If it's a bigger company, it might be a little different than a smaller business, but they're going to tell you they need money, they need people, they need programs, they need support from the town. Maybe they have a pet peeve about, and I'm not picking on any department because I haven't heard anything bad, but maybe somebody's not being cooperative. Maybe it's a state regulated issue, because some industries have regulations from the state or federal government. You're going to find out what they need, and then it's your job. The next stepping stone is to deliver the resources to them. And very often it's money. They need to buy a piece of equipment. They need to hire people. They need to buy a building and rehab it. They need energy conservation improvements. They need just sort of technical support on a particular business issue, like cash flow analysis or something. These are just samples of some of the agencies that are really great to work with. The Connecticut Women's Business Development Council, for example, is extremely active all over Connecticut. If it's funding, there's the SBA, loan guarantees that are most bigger banks are SBA lenders, but you also have middleman type, middle people, whatever you want to use for a phrase there. Community Investment Corporation has lending programs, and they also very often do evaluations of credit and things like that. So there's many resources. It could also be regulations like Department of Environmental Protection, or it could be any number of issues that Labor Department that you want to bring the resources to them. But that's down the road. That's not right away. I think spending time in the first phase alone will take you months. So that's what we're going to probably come back to. So the other things that companies need as you talk to them, of course, workforce is like the number one, number two, and very often number three thing. And workforce training is important, but other workforce issues become important for Mika to hear about, and you, Mika, because he's looking at a bigger picture than you are. You know, they might talk about housing, they might talk about daycare, they might talk about road issues. My God, when I get off of exit 59, and you know, I got to be careful what time of day I get off, you know, and with traffic and so forth. Maybe they're looking for energy conservation issues, new things like AI. You know, I'm just learning about that now. They may have an interest in that, and that's something good. Any of these topics will be good to have speakers come to the EDC so you can learn more. You're, like I said, you're there to learn as much as listen. And then incentives, towns are talk about incentives, but what are incentives? What are samples of incentives? I've run many incentive programs, so these are things that you might hear from businesses when you go to see them. Incentives also may be useful for the expansion part, that maybe they want to add 1,000 square feet to their building or something like that. So these are things that they're going to come up with. Another aspect of, and I'm going to move on to business visitation in a minute, Scott. Infrastructure needs, that's sort of a bigger picture issue. Most towns do sort of a capital improvements review before they do their town budget, so they can figure out if they have to do any bonding, for example, for roadways and things. Looking at water and sewer capacity, because a lot of towns like Woodbridge don't have sewer capacity, or they have minimal sewer capacity. Road improvements, road widening. There's a lot of things you can take a look at, and that should be done in a sort of on a calendar basis with the EDC and the town. Do they have like a finance committee of the council? Is that the form of financial governing that Woodbridge has? Is there like a
yeah, there's a board of finance.
Okay, right. So they're probably doing like a CapEx, capital improvements review at some point in the year, probably right about now, I'm guessing, because they're going to start working on their budget in the spring, in the early spring, late winter. And that's something you should be plugged into, because, as you talk to businesses, you want to be on top of what the town is thinking about, because you're salespeople. Anytime a business says, "Oh, I've been here forever. I want to, I really want to stay in Woodbridge. I'm looking for a bigger place. And I really don't, I never really thought of leaving Woodbridge." Well, they're probably not telling you the truth. They're probably looking at other towns, because they're going to look at taxes, because taxes are not low in Woodbridge. But they are, they have to be comparing. Any responsible person would look at an industrial building in Orange or anywhere else. They might want to stay in Woodbridge, but you need to be on top of these things, because, for example, internet fiber, with download and upload speeds are really important now with 3D printing and in many different industries. And then, when you get to other issues, there will be collaborations that come up related to workforce, because this is a big problem for manufacturers and healthcare, even hospitality, restaurants, and so on and so forth. And a lot of public schools, or even after high school, you want to have the relationships in place to start providing support to businesses that have workforce issues. So that's sort of the 40,000 feet level. I'm going to move on to business visitation, but first, are there any comments or questions?
No, Dale, I think this is a good overview.
Okay.
I think some of these needs are going to vary by sector, right?
Correct.
So
That's right.
it'd be interesting as we dig in, like, retail will probably have different needs than manufacturing.
Absolutely. Right? No, you're right. You're totally right.
So we'll see things by cluster.
Right. So you're gonna, you know, at the end of this conversation tonight, and then moving forward, we're gonna focus on like one or two things, the low hanging fruit. How, you also want to, you know, check in. We have to get the largest employers, but like a healthcare visit and a manufacturing or construction visit would probably be a good, like good diverse way to start. Anything that touches many different industries is a good place to start. Like I always talk about manufacturing because they have a supply chain. They source
Mhm.
materials. They need workers. They have transportation needs, and they have all kinds of needs that touch other aspects of the economy. Healthcare, another example. Healthcare or senior care, you know, they have cleaning contracts, security contracts. They have a lot of stuff that they do in-house and a lot of stuff they don't do in-house. So anytime you can work, if you have to make a decision on where to put your effort, I always start with sectors that have multiple impacts, ripple impacts. Construction, you know, they buy stone and wood and concrete and, you know, things that some of it's sourced in town or in the region, but that's where you want to start because you're going to get the biggest bang. So when you do a site visit, again, I'm not going to go through every aspect of this. I'm going to send these documents to you, Scott, and you can distribute them
Okay.
to the members. Site visits, this generically speaking, again, I mentioned some of this before. You want to really do it when it's convenient for them. Maybe they don't mind a Zoom meeting, but I find in the beginning, the first time you go, you should probably go live. They, like, manufacturers love showing you what they do. They're really proud of it. And it's something you can learn about. And so you could read this, but basically, you know, you kind of go along with what the customer needs. And here are like a whole bunch of questions. Some of it's obvious, but you don't go in and say, hey, do you mind if I ask you 11 questions? That's not going to work. But you
Mhm.
want to go in, basically, you sit down usually at a conference table uh, and just chat about what's going on with them, how they are they happy, what are they looking to do, the kinds of information that you want to find out in a site visit on a larger employer, which is a little different than a smaller one. You know, here are some of the issues. Some of it you're going to go in, you're going to go online to their website, and you're going to learn about as much as you can. You may know a lot of these people. You're local, you know, you may know them, but you want to find out how they're affected by things that are, you know, really not in their world of business. So if they're regulated by the state of Connecticut, they have zoning enforcement issues. Um, Find out who their customers are. You know, do they export? There's no chamber of commerce, right, in Woodbridge?
No, there's no chamber. The Orange Chamber of Commerce is going to be rebranding to Amity to
Okay.
include Woodbridge and Bethany,
Okay, cool.
uh,
All right.
probably in the next 3 to 6 months.
So if they export, you know, most people don't even think of this, but what people don't know is chambers of commerce have a lot of, they offer a lot of assistance with exporting, and some of it is mandated by the federal government. So if they export, you know, you're going to be making some connections. This is all about helping them feel good about being in Woodbridge. How do they bid their work? Do they use bid to government, other similar companies? How do they attain their clients? What are the biggest cost burdens? I can tell you right now, it's healthcare and insurance. You know, wages are usually not their biggest cost burden because they don't pay. Most companies, most industries don't pay enough. There's such wage disparity now in almost every industry. Healthcare is usually the big one. You know how much
Well,
subcontract?
Dale,
Yep.
I would probably jump in there because wages, I think it, obviously it depends by sector,
Yep.
right? But if you are a retail focused business, all right, and I can just speak from my own personal perspective, the minimum wage in Connecticut is a huge cost driver. Like it's legislated to go up every single year
Right. What's it
indefinitely.
now? What is it now?
It's 1569 now. It's going to 1635. Um, but I can tell you back in 2019, pre-COVID, it was $10.10 an hour. So it's gone up substantially since COVID through all of
Yeah.
it. So, and there's nothing Woodbridge can do about that, but I think it's a factor in Connecticut without a doubt.
Well, it could be, but then again, when you look at the broader economy in any town, it's not even Woodbridge, it's any town. To rent an apartment, you need to make about $30 an hour.
Right.
So, or if you could imagine buying a house. My son's 26 and he has a small child. No way he can ever, I think he makes about, with overtime, like 60 grand a year. And he'll go up a little bit, but you're not even close to buying a house, that kind of income. So the point is that, yes, it does hurt small businesses. I hear that. But again, if you're looking at growing the overall economy and the housing market as people retire and stuff, it's an issue. Again, to the extent you can help them with some of the, just listening to them, sometimes it's legislation. So subcontracting work, the supply chain where they get their stuff, maybe you can do some mixing and matching. Always tell the story of working with a glass company in Hamden, Connecticut, where I worked for 21 years. The DOT was building a garage right across the street from a glass manufacturing, a commercial glass company. And they told me they were buying their glass from a company in Massachusetts because they were just used to doing it. And I had turned it around, so they gave the contract to the local glass company. So there's some of that can happen. Understanding the trends in their field is important, so you could be helpful in the future, because business retention is not a one-shot thing. It's an ongoing thing. Internet capacity, all these things are important on their growth, because a lot of internet stuff is proprietary. And it's a battle usually between Comcast, GoNetspeed, if they're even in Woodbridge, and Frontier. There's not many options, but you need to at least understand, especially since in COVID, a lot of people started businesses in their home. Energy needs, how they, whether they're going to expand their workforce. These are all the things you want to find out, but it's got to be in a conversational way, not like. And usually after you sit down for a while, you go on you definitely get a tour. You ask for a tour. Can I see what you do here? And I did one in North Branford a couple months ago, and it was incredible because they were so excited to show us everything they did. And now they continue to talk. So I'm going to move
Dale,
on. Yeah.
When we look at like number 11, right? Workforce needs and challenges, which is kind of a broad topic.
Yeah.
Right. Labor supply within the town, right? Meaning, how do we get at some questions like how dependent are they upon sourcing workers from Woodbridge, right? Versus the region.
Well, I think the goal with retention is to retain the business.
Right.
You have to think regionally when you think about workforce.
Right.
Where are they getting their workforce from? It's not going to be Woodbridge. To the extent that you can find out, let's say it's in manufacturing or healthcare. I don't know what the Amity has to offer for career development for students, whether they have any kind of vocational program. I know some towns have it, like Milford has it at Platt Tech and some other places. You don't have a lot of these programs, I'm guessing, at Amity, but maybe there's some industries where collaborating with Amity is okay, or Southern, or Gateway, or University of New Haven. I think that you want to make sure that the business is happy. Don't worry about the workers yet, because there's just not going to be that many from Woodbridge, I don't think. But to the extent you're trying to help them with that, that's the more important thing.
Yeah, I guess it's just how do you phrase the question, right, as to whether the availability of labor supply from Woodbridge is a factor in their decision to stay? Was it a factor in their decision to come here in the first place?
I doubt
Would it
it.
be?
I doubt it very much.
Well, yeah.
To me, it's a non-important to the business. I'm talking about to the business. It's
Mhm.
not that important to them. When you say, what are your greatest needs, they're gonna talk about workforce. It's almost always the case. And you're gonna say, tell us more. You let them talk.
Yeah.
You may slip in a question, how many of your employees have traditionally come or historically come from Woodbridge? But that's not really helpful to them. They just want to know, you just want to know what their needs are. So if you know, for example, if it's a manufacturer, that there's a program called MATCH, MATCH, which there is.
Mhm.
There's a manufacturer of lighting supplies in North Branford that runs a regional program for training, which will take students from any town, by the way, not just North Branford. That's more important information to them. You might ask them casually that question, Scott, but I don't think it's that important to them.
Mhm.
They might say, "Oh, we'd love to hire more local people." Then that's a cue probably to
Right.
to get into connecting them. I personally need to learn more about what Amity does for their students, so I can better help you with this particular issue, because I don't know enough. My guess is it's not going to be as proactive with some things. They're probably, most kids are being sort of trained to go to college. It's a
Mhm.
little bit of a stereotype, I guess, but I'm guessing it's probably more in that direction.
I guess the reason I dig in on this, Dale, not to prolong it, is there's a lot of conversation around workforce housing,
Yes,
okay, here in Woodbridge. And when we think about attracting and retaining businesses to Woodbridge, right, somehow gauging the significance of that on, retaining and attracting businesses is something I think would be important to help demonstrate, if you want to build the commercial tax base in Woodbridge, you need to have housing for people to live here,
right,
right?
right.
And
No,
to build that case, if it's in fact a factor.
well, it's important in certain industries, right? So I'm
Mhm.
going to say healthcare has a broad spectrum of jobs, from medical type jobs to CNAs to administrative. So I think certain industries that might be more applicable. If you're walking into a manufacturer, there's so few bodies out there that in Woodbridge that could help them. But in healthcare, it might be a factor. So, it is something to, also, there are other people that are in the professional services, legal, and so on and so forth, that are part of those industries.
Mhm.
And that's also another potential impact on workforce. But the fact that you would have a housing strategy alone is an important thing for more on the attraction side than the retention side. So we're talking retention today. So attraction,
Yeah.
attraction, yes, the housing, that's a point very well taken. Because if they're moving their people from Massachusetts down here somewhere, you want them, you want more than just the jobs here. You in the commercial part, you want them to buy houses perhaps, or live here somehow, and,
Mhm.
and then feed smaller businesses. I'm going to move to smaller businesses
Okay.
for a second. So not everything's a big company. There's smaller businesses, your small retail shops. Some of this gets to placemaking, where you have smaller entities, arts and culture, um, retail, boutiques, all kinds of things that are not necessarily like bigger companies. 2030 gets into this, your 2030 committee, and that's another topic for another day, but that's some of what they were working on. Access, catalytic kind of projects. So business visitation is for smaller businesses, the same concept, where you're going to go and visit them. You might not have as much of a formal visit or as many people, because they're usually small places versus a warehouse or something. But it just depends how many employees. So if you're looking at a smaller company, it could be services, insurance, hair, all kinds of things. Retail, of course, we're used to. These are the categories. I don't have formal questions, but so much as I have, you're like, oh my God, we got to talk to them about all that stuff. Again, you may know a lot of this information. This is just a guide on, so once you pick a couple to visit, we can say, okay, let's not talk about workforce. We know, they only have 3 employees. There's not much to talk about there unless they bring it up. So these are things you want to find out from smaller businesses, depending on who you visit. And here is a list. Again, I'm going to forward this to you. A lot of businesses want to expand. Again, this is a business retention strategy. So, permitting may be a big thing because they want to add, a little redo their bathrooms there, or they want to add ADA improvements or energy improvements. So there's certain things you're going to want to, once you learn what they want, these are the kinds of things you want to find out. Again, it could be financing. Where's the money part? The money part's in here. What are the space needs? What are their financing needs? Again, this is before you start introducing from the other handout, all these programs that might be helpful to them. Maybe once you do a bunch of visitations for smaller businesses, you have a bagels and coffee morning when you bring in the speakers. After you've already identified some of the needs, you can tailor the event. That's all business retention. Where their space needs, maybe they rent and they're really looking to own. Sort of depends on the interest rates, obviously. Do they want to stay there? I had in another town, I had a business visitation recently where the person was renting and they really wanted the owner to, step up and make improvements, or else they might have to move their location. And maybe they want a new location. Maybe there is an opportunity to use an SBA program. SBA has many programs. One's called a 504. That's a purchase of a property and the rehabilitation of that property in one financing packages. It has a blend of interest rates, but the more you can learn about their needs, the more you can bring resources. These are things you want to find out. How are they doing with the local, the local town departments? They might be in a DOT right away. If they're on, is Amity Road a DOT road?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you need a curb cut, what can the EDC or the town do to help speed that up? Because the DOT is very understaffed. Most state agencies are very understaffed. They need a traffic, permit if they're in DOT, or they need some, your police department handles traffic. Supply chain issues, again, in some of this, you may not be able to help them at all, but at least you're asking the questions and you're connecting with them. They really do appreciate it. Finding out how committed they are to the town. I always ask people, what do you think the town should be doing? Where do you think the future lies in Woodbridge? You might hear some positive or negative things. You have to listen. I always ask that kind of question to give them a stake, skin in the game. They're not just somebody who pays rent somewhere. Somebody, they probably have opinions. I'm sure most people do. And then whether you're doing a bigger company visit or a small business visit, I always obviously take notes. They don't have to be fancy notes because most of this, if you start doing these, let's say you did one a month, all of a sudden you're going to get backed up with notes. You really want to make sure that you document and obviously thank them and contact them later. If there's some hot issue that they're upset about, maybe they're not getting their building permit fast enough, or maybe the zoning department visited them with some sort of ZBA violation. If there's something you need to, following up very quickly is really important, because most businesses have no tolerance for local government. They're impatient. They think the government is, most people think the government is not in their favor when they own a small business. But following up is important, like any other client. If you all are in different businesses, and I know I got 2 emails last night myself. I really didn't feel like responding to them, but I knew that they needed the answer. So I spent like an hour this morning responding to both, and both really appreciated it. So following up is important. So I'm going to stop there. I know I went off like on tangents galore there, But these are all things, and the first thing I said to you was business visitation is not just like a business retention is not just going to visit and saying, how are you today? I mean, obviously you have to be friendly and all, but it's more structured than that. So those are the documents, Scott. And then I think, as I said in the very first one, you want to start targeting a couple industries and just do a couple, get them under your belt, and work from there. You'll learn where to kind of go once you start doing a couple of visits.
Okay. So we assemble the list, right?
Yep.
And identify the sectors. I mean, that seems to be the obvious next step here, right?
Yep.
Would you recommend starting with, hey, approach a certain sector first? Or should we go to the smallest players or the biggest players, or like?
Well, I would say first I would talk to Goldman and York because they're really kind of making lists now. And I want to see what you were talking about because I remember there was something, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
See what you have, see what Goldman and York is doing. I tend to, for a first visit for an EDC, pick the low hanging fruit, pick somebody who who you're comfortable with just to get used to doing it. I did one in another town and the first selectman was like, he wanted to do the most successful company in the whole town. I'm like, I wasn't going to tell him what to do, but I'm thinking to myself, well, they're already really successful. They're not leaving. They just expanded and invested $10 million in their plant. I said, that's nice practice for the EDC. They had never done anything like that before. I said, but you got to pick somebody you don't know or you don't know as well, because that's where you're really going to find out the facts, what's going on on Main Street. So I would say, let's get some information and set up another another Zoom type meeting.
Okay.
Or maybe perhaps at one of your board meetings, but you also want to try to work in between your board meetings so you don't, because this can be laborious. But let me see what you have, and but I would say pick one or two things where there's an impact in different ways, like pick either a manufacturer or a construction company, because they all touch many different industries and have different employees, and then maybe pick something in healthcare, which is definitely a big sector in Woodbridge in terms of taxpayers and employers. That's what I would do.
Okay. So to sort of contrast across different sectors then.
Exactly.
Versus, all right, let's go deep on retail.
No, you should pick, like 3 targets. You're not gonna, in the middle of the winter, now we're moving into the winter, whenever it becomes winter. Probably the first day you go to do a visit, you'll have a snowstorm. But I think you want to, have a target of 2 or 3 things, each in a different area of the economy.
Okay. My other question for you was, how do we think about like, and in your work with other towns, what are some of like the lag indicators of success, right? So is it turnover? How do other towns measure their business retention efforts?
It's a great question. I think most of the towns I've worked with it's too early to tell. I think it's going to be by one of the ways I judge it is obviously if somebody pulls a permit to expand or, they do something new, but who is showing up at the follow-up meetings with them over time. I think, who's coming to like that breakfast, who is responding to your emails and who you have dialogue with. It's much more informal than you think. It's not like business attraction where the benchmark is going to be how many capital investment dollars were put into buying buildings or rehabbing buildings or whatever. It's much more subtle with retention. The other thing you find out with on these visits, and I didn't put it in the handout, but there's always additional things you want to know, is, you're going to learn about the ownership of that business. Like, are the owners 75 years old? Are they 35 years old? Are they thinking about retiring? Do they have children that they want to pass down? Because I can tell you lots of stories about not following up on that and finding that they retired and their kids didn't want the business, and there's a church in there next thing you know. So you definitely want to find out. So retention is not just about growth, it's about stability, I guess.
Right.
I'm thinking about that as I'm saying it. So when you go in there, you're going to say, okay, the owner, like I went to the one I was telling you about where they picked the richest company in the whole town. The person who started the company in 1948 was there, and he was like 85 years old, but his sons were in their 40s and 50s, and they're definitely carrying on the business. So I have nothing to worry about. But when they're older, it's an older insurance company, it's an older, dentist, or, whatever it is. Definitely pay attention to that, because what is the support? How are you going to keep them going? And there are actually programs for that. UNH has a great program for legacy businesses, legacy business owners, people that want to pass it along to their kids. And there's a lot you can learn from that. The other thing, and whether it's retention or attraction, and forgive my attention deficit disorder here, thinking about a lot of things for you guys. You want to start bringing speakers about industries to your commission, just guest speakers to meet the commission, whether it's healthcare, whether it's like a Jamie Scott to talk about what he does and who his customers are. So you learn about certain industries too. I did this once with the New Haven Chamber, and I brought the largest employer, which was a senior care healthcare facility, and he talked for an hour and a half about all the supply chain impacts of that business, and right in Hamden proper, and I was stunned. I knew about it, but I was stunned. I didn't realize, landscaping and, all this stuff that a bigger company like a healthcare facility that has to have look good. So, you're going to learn other stuff when you go in there, but like learning about ownership is not like a sexy thing, but it's a stable thing, stability thing. I hope I answered your question. I think the question a long time ago was, how do you measure? It's
well, there's the lag indicators, right? So I think you're really hitting on just engagement, right?
Yeah.
How engaged are they? Are they showing up? Getting them to visit and dialogue with the EDC. I think you could look at investment. I think you could look at turnover, ultimately vacancy rates, occupancy. There probably are several, if we were to measure like the efforts of our business retention activities.
Well, one of the related topics here is, if it's a strip center or a shopping center or like a multi-tenanted building and you're visiting one of the businesses, you want to learn about, you want to know who all the main owners are. You want to have a list of everybody who owns a bigger multi-tenanted property, because you're going to hear things from the tenants that it has nothing to do with them. It might have something to do with the owner. But that's the engagement part.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cliff, Sherry, any questions or?
The only question, I would say the only question I had was when you were talking about sectors.
Yep.
Is it, being that there's a few of us here, is it worth us each taking a sector and focusing on it?
They're really good questions, Sherry. I don't know if I said this during this meeting or when I was talking to Scott earlier, because Scott and I talk about, just to prepare for these meetings, topics, is that I really need to get back to knowing you guys more individually, like what industries you're in, because that could answer your question. If I have a healthcare person or a lawyer, I know every commission has a couple lawyers on it, whatever area of law they practice, I can answer your question based on the background, so we don't, we can spend time. Time would be better spent because not everybody's going to be able to make the visit during the work hours and things
Right.
like that. So to answer your question, by understanding the commission itself better, that would help answer the, create a better, more efficient strategy, I guess, as well.
Right, right. Okay, thank you.
And the other thing is, the last thing I'll say about this is, yes, you have appointed EDC members by the town. You're not elected, you're appointed, right? You're all appointed.
Yes.
Yes.
So, because some towns have elected, which is always troublesome. In my mind, anyway. They want to get reelected. Believe it or not, politicians always want to get reelected. It's amazing, isn't it? Anyway, but you also have the possibility of bringing in other people to the process that might not be on the commission, but they, as a retired concerned business person or whatever, it doesn't always have to be EDC members. You might bring in outside people to work with the EDC. I've seen that happen. I've seen it actually happening more often than I think about. People that just like to listen in. They like to be part of things, So
Mhm.
just keep that in mind.
Right. Okay.
More stuff to think about, Scott.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm thinking is we should probably, I mean, December is gonna be nuts. We should probably plan to reconvene after the beginning of the year and put a short-term focus on, assembling that database, work with Goldman and York or whatever we have, revisit what we have internally.
Yeah.
But we got to have a database, right, before we can really do anything.
You got to know what you have before you have a good
Yeah.
strategy.
And it's kind of crazy if you ask that question, like, okay, so who are you're the EDC, who are the employers in your town? Who's your largest employer? Okay, right? I mean, it's probably a utility company. That doesn't really count.
The
So,
town itself is usually the biggest employer.
right, right. So, I mean, I think, from a business retention standpoint, we need to get educated on that.
Yep.
And I want to, I'll reach out to Goldman in York as the next step because I do, I'm going to talk with him about our economic development plan. And see what they've uncovered and how they can help us really, I think, organize it by sector is probably where they can come in and do some of the groundwork for us. And then I like Sherry's idea, let's, divide by sector is a way to do it, even if, I don't know how much sector expertise we have amongst the four of us, when we include Rick, but you'd be amazed can get educated on things pretty quickly, right?
Well, the thing is, even if they're not on the business retention, you might have other members that have something to contribute and they can share that would help.
Right. Right. And then I think, ultimately getting that assembled and then being more, more disciplined in reaching out proactively versus, right now I get a lot of phone calls from Tony and she's like, okay, Amity Pharmacy's here and they want to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like we should probably be ahead of that.
Well, there's always going to be that. And if that comes up, then, you gotta respond. But yeah,
Right.
you're right.
And the last piece is, as we think about a year from now, they're going to be tearing up the business district, right? Where a lot of these businesses reside. And tearing it up is probably a strong word, but we know that there's a pretty heavy duty infrastructure project that's going to take place. And I think that's a good opportunity for us to get in front of a lot of those in the business district. It's sort of a foot in the door to start the conversation and to be armed with here's what to expect, and personalize it a little more.
Yeah, because you want to make sure they're staying.
Right. So I'll take the the next step on this and take a look at what we have, and then I'll reach out to Justin and Denise at Goldman and kind of see where they are, if they've pulled anything like this together, because I know they're working behind the scenes as well. And then we can regroup I think after the first of the year. We are going to have goals that we're going to need to set as an EDC, and I think we should definitely, have some sort of a business retention goal. That was the reason for like, what are the lag indicators, and so what could we look at in like a 90-day or a 12-month perspective.
Right.
So, all right.
Right.
And I'll follow up with Rick as well. I know he couldn't make it tonight.
All right. Well, it's good to see you all again. And,
Yeah.
Dale, thank you. Thank you for your expertise.
and I'm
Appreciate
going to
it.
send this, I'll send the 3 things I showed you, peruse. If
Great.
I don't do it today, I'll do it tomorrow.
Awesome.
All right. Great.
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Thank you.
nice
Have a good
holiday.
Happy
You
Thanksgiving.
too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.